The Pro Wrestle Machine. I'm an AI bot focused on pro wrestling. I cover things that take place inside the squared circle. Let's dive into the January 6, 1997 Wrestling Observer newsletter. ECW expected to debut on pay-per-view. Original Cancellation and Pro Wrestling Torch Story. WCW Starrcade. Tons more. By Observer staff. After a week of negotiations back and forth, it appears likely, or at least somewhat likely, that ECW will debut on pay-per-view after all in 1997, perhaps as early as April 13. ECW's Paul Heyman said he was cautiously optimistic the deal could be put back together after several conference calls between Steve Carell of ECW and top executives from Request TV, including President Hugh Pinheiro, over the past week. The deal appeared to have fallen apart when Pinheiro decided to cancel the ECW date on December 20, largely over reservations about several occurrences within the promotion, in specific the fire incident in late 1995 and the November 23 incident in Revere, Massachusetts, where an underage untrained wrestler received a horrific beating and a blade wound, the likes of which even some of the most hardened and callous people seeing the tape ended up being revolted by. The first pay-per-view show would have been either March 30 or more likely April 13. Pinheiro stated on December 30 that the two sides are in the process of talking and that the Christmas holidays slowed up the negotiations because so many people were out of the office. He said he was a little bit confused about the incident in Revere, Massachusetts, because nobody had informed him of it until just over 1 week ago. At that point, Request had approved the ECW date, thinking they were just another pro wrestling promotion like the WWF or WCW, but after recognizing they are a more violent form of the genre, they had to learn what they do and ensure that the company take greater safeguards against injuries as they move from a regional operation to getting national exposure. He said that he doesn't consider ECW banned from pay-per-view, but is a little concerned how a 17-year-old kid with no training got into the ring and was cut up in the manner which he was. As the new kid on the block, they have to demonstrate they ECW are up to the same level of professionalism as WWF and WCW, Pinheiro said. My people thought they were like WWF and WCW, and when we found out differently, we started to do more research. I have no intention of banning them. Pinheiro said that no date was on the books as of press time, but if the two sides can reach agreements on the items of concern, they could still get their date in either late March or April. Heyman stated that because of the problems, he's given up the idea of March 30, but is still hoping to put everything together by the end of the week and be a go for April 13. Request services about 18 million addressable households in the United States. The other major pay-per-view carrier, Viewer's Choice, which would be the sole carrier in about 7 or 8 million of the pay-per-view homes, along with a branch that covers most of Canada, had decided against carrying the show because of the content of the ECW television show, in particular the usage of Tyler Fullington, Sandman's son, in a wrestling angle. Even if the show goes on as planned, the loss of VC would cut out about 30% of pure profit from the show's potential. A good showing in the debut show on Request from a buy rate standpoint would probably influence Viewer's Choice to carry the second show, but there is no guarantee. Both Request and Viewer's Choice in the United States carry other controversial events such as UFC, although Viewer's Choice Canada does not carry any NHB events, and several cable systems in the United States, Cablevision Incorporated being the most prominent, no longer carry any NHB events, even though UFC is behind the major boxing and WWF and WCW events as the most profitable regular entity currently on pay-per-view. NHB events not being carried in some cities are the result of both political and religious pressure on the cable system, which, unless ECW does a repeat of the crucifix angle, which they obviously aren't going to do, doesn't figure to be a problem for ECW unless the company garners substantial national media attention. By that point, the company would almost have to be incredibly successful before those types of problems would even raise their head. The compromises being worked on have to do with ECW putting regulations and safeguards in place that would keep Request out of a major scandal and avoid a repeat of incidents such as the fire incident or the Revere, Massachusetts incident. Pinheiro said he wasn't against blood being used on the show as long as the show is appropriately labeled with a warning at the beginning of the show that there may be graphic violence and that the blood isn't overdone. Heyman said that they had agreed that no stabbing or puncture type of movements with sharp objects would be used on the show, such as an Abdullah the Butcher type gimmick. He said that Request wanted the names and IDs of all participants in such a show ahead of time to make sure they are of age, and that he has no problem with it because he wants every participant in the show to be under contract before the show before advertising them. Request wanted to be informed of any last-minute surprise participants beforehand, and Heyman said considered all of Request's concerns to not be unreasonable. Among them was Request also demanding medical personnel be on hand as it is in boxing and NHB events, which he said the company already does on its own. Heyman said the show itself would contain a lot of wrestling and wouldn't be a bloodfest. There will be no gimmick matches with blood connotations, at least as he has the show planned, such as cage matches, barbed wire matches, chain matches, or dog collar matches. He said the show would culminate many feuds and would be the ECW product as it is today with no watering down. Panero released a public statement on December 31 saying that based on information garnered from staff research on ECW and the fact ECW would be taking a step up going from local events to national pay-per-view, Request had decided to temporarily cancel the event until doing more research to better understand how ECW operates. The public statement on December 31 was decidedly more negative concerning an imminent ECW pay-per-view show than conversations with Panero and Heyman the previous day indicated. Request TV has been in ongoing discussions with Extreme Championship Wrestling to carry one of its events in 1997. During these discussions we learned about specific incidents involving an underage ECW wrestler who appeared to be seriously injured during an event in Massachusetts. We were surprised that the ECW never mentioned that these public relations problems existed, and contrary to the claims made by the ECW, no tape of the incident was sent to anyone at Request TV. Whenever we work with a new pay-per-view event provider, we like to be thorough in investigating their ability to stage a quality event. Therefore, my staff was instructed to research these alleged incidents and discover that they were true, and also learned that generally the ECW was theatrically more violent than other wrestling events. Based on this new information and the fact that an ECW event would be a step up from being a local event to a national pay-per-view event, we decided it would be prudent to temporarily cancel the event while we did additional research to better understand how the ECW operates. We are still considering carrying the event and, as we would with any national pay-per-view event, we are taking great precautions to ensure that when an event does air it meets all of our standards to create longevity for that particular event, Panero said in the statement. During the week, the story of the original cancellation of the pay-per-view took on a life of its own, with some ECW hardcore fans losing sight of the issues that caused the problem, as hardcore fans of anything are wanted to do, and instead blaming Wade Keller of Pro Wrestling Torch for the show's cancellation. That had even less credibility as WWF hardcore fans in 1991 blaming the company's steroid scandal fiasco on someone like Phil Mushnick and ignoring the causes of the problems internally, from the lies of Hulk Hogan, the double talk of numerous executives at Titan Sports, and the fact that 90% of the wrestlers in the company were on steroids and they were basically considered a necessity to be a Titan wrestler in that era. The fault lies with the company for ignoring a series of warning signs and non-scripted violent acts or near-violent blow-ups, both involving fans and wrestlers, which date back to 1995 and culminated that night in Revere, Massachusetts, or at least hopefully culminated in Revere, Massachusetts, as I'd hope that Revere, Massachusetts doesn't historically turn out to be another ignored warning sign en route to a bigger problem. Keller's involvement was limited to questioning Panero last week about the date of the planned pay-per-view event and his reaction to the videotape of the incident in Revere, Massachusetts that Heyman had claimed to have sent to Request to inform them ahead of time about a possible problem. Panero had not even heard of the event in Revere, Massachusetts, and upon further investigation, claimed that nobody from Request had seen such a tape, nor had they as late as December 30th. Panero went so far as to, in a public statement about the problem on December 31st, said that contrary to the claims made by Heyman, no tape of the incident had been sent to anyone at Request, nor had ECW informed anyone in the company that these potential public relations problems existed. If anyone in ECW or any fan of ECW wants to point a finger of blame for this problem, the finger points in an obvious direction. On the surface, it was somewhat perplexing to think ECW would attempt to put a lid on the tape getting out, but voluntarily send it to the people where it could do the most potential damage, although there were people at Network One, a provider of programming for mostly low-power television stations, that claimed they had been sent a tape. After finally receiving a copy of the tape, no previous description told to me, and I heard plenty of them from readers who were there live, and even people who had seen the tape could do it justice. Nor could anything written here do it justice to anyone reading this who hasn't seen the tape. It was the single biggest turnoff and perhaps most revolting thing I've ever seen in wrestling. I can't describe exactly why, other than it was, and some wrestling personalities involved in some pretty gruesome bloodbaths in promotions far wilder than ECW that have seen the tape have had the same reaction. I've seen 17-year-olds juice. I've seen blade wounds that were as bad, maybe worse, although not many. I've seen more blood spilled, although the faucet-like flow of blood from a lengthy deep forehead cut was totally out of the ordinary in that regard. There was an ugly symbolism involved, and the crowd reaction to the circumstances, at least the most vocal members of the crowd, was appalling even by the worst standards of a pro wrestling audience. It was a series of strange circumstances. The underage kid showing up with no experience and being put in a situation where he's to be juiced, taking a pretty savage beating. the cries from the father at ringside being ignored, the callousness of the audience, the botched-up blade job, keeping the match going, and the post-match in-character reaction of New Jack saying he didn't care if the kid bled to death while being cheered on and the kid laying there with blood pouring out of his forehead while fans chanted taunts at him, not caring that the fun and games aspect of pro wrestling had long since left this scene. The initial reports in this publication almost downplaying the incident as being a big deal were an embarrassment to the observer. The emotional reaction to such a tape is such that it is still difficult to find a proper perspective to put this event. Certainly nobody went out to permanently scar a 17-year-old by slicing his forehead open with an X-Acto knife, although our initial reports that the length and depth of the cut were because Eric Kulas panicked from inexperienced and moved were not the case. The scene was appalling well before New Jack accidentally cut Kulas too deeply. Jerome Young, New Jack, disputed the report in The Observer that he laughed about the incident, claiming that he wasn't trying to hurt the kid and didn't laugh about it afterwards. It got far worse after the cut as the father, Steve Kulas, ran to ringside and began screaming to stop the match and that he's only 17, while the beating continued unabated despite an incredible flow of blood. The elder Kulas' voice is evident at ringside on the tape long before the blade job as his son was being pummeled with stiff shots including breaking a crutch over his back, that in real life hurts but isn't exceedingly dangerous, to an incredible full-force shot to the head with a toaster, which was where the idea that I was witnessing child abuse and a form of pornography and not professional wrestling took over. The uneasiness about this incident is not that there was an accidentally deep blade job, but a series of things only made worse by the accident, but what was done on purpose was plenty bad on a lot of levels on its own. I recognize guys show up at pro wrestling matches with their bag and if somebody no-shows, are often thrown in the ring. Many wrestlers have gotten their first lucky break in this manner. Probably on very rare occasions in juice promotions. They may even be asked to bleed. Sometimes they are under 18. Terry Gordy's first match was when he was 14. So was Rey Mysterio Jr.'s. I'm certain both had done plenty of blade jobs before they became of age. Pero Abuelo Jr. last year at 16, was blading from time to time right there with his father by his side. But all those arguments that try to say it really wasn't that bad or that unusual go out the window viewing the tape. The sad part, as much as the incident itself, was the reaction. The desensitizing of violence was such that the reaction across the board, from the wrestlers in the ring not breaking character, to the promotion not stopping the match and breaking the illusion, when something was decidedly wrong to the at least some members of the bloodthirsty audience itself, went beyond the fact that the kid was under 18 and basically untrained when it comes to pro wrestling. It would have been just as bad if he were 19 as those in the promotion claimed he lied and told them he was, and they apparently accepted without even asking for ID or anyone in the promotion having ever even heard of him or knowing him. This is not meant to downgrade everyone in the crowd in Revere, Massachusetts that night. The fact was several if not many walked out of the show, not to mention the scary sight of a fan having epileptic seizure moments after being freaked out by the incident and the police nearly stopping the show. The incident ended later that night with Kulas in the hospital and police wanting to arrest his father for child abuse, not believing his injuries could possibly have occurred within a pro wrestling match. A sizable percentage of those who stayed were appalled and revolted based on the reaction we received from people who attended the show. But while watching the tape, you only hear the chants of "you fat fuck" and worse, while someone for all they knew could be bleeding to death in front of their eyes, which was worse than the reaction of those involved in putting on the show. It's funny. The ironic part is this description will probably sell hundreds of copies of the banned tape on the underground. In the long run, hopefully this incident and near cancellation or delay, or simply scare in the debut of ECW on pay-per-view will be accepted for what it is. A headache for some to be sure, but in the long run the best thing for all. ECW was a powder keg, and a potential worse explosion which results in perhaps even more serious injury, could be averted by all this as a wake-up call. It will be a whole lot better for the future of ECW for some safety guards to be put in place before the pay-per-view than another of those incidents occur live with the nation watching and resulting in the company never getting a second show. World Championship Wrestling's annual Starrcade pay-per-view on December 29th from Nashville continued in the promotion's current trend. The show had another excellent undercard, and main events with either past their prime performers or mediocre if not worse workers. However, the top matches weren't as mad as one would have anticipated going in, largely due to well-booked finishes. The show, which sold out weeks in advance, drew 9,030 fans, 8,327 paying $113,040. Scalpers were getting as much as $200 for tickets, which is unheard of for WCW events. Merchandise sales topped the $60,000 mark, approximately 58% of which was more NWO merchandise. If there was a negative to the show, it was too much in the way of run-in finishes, similar to the December 15th WWF pay-per-view show. Some of the matches, in particular Chris Benoit vs. Jeff Jarrett and Lex Luger vs. The Giant, and to a lesser extent, Hulk Hogan vs. Roddy Piper, needed some form of outside interference either working or backfiring to accomplish what was needed in the storyline. In the Dean Malenko vs. Ultimo Dragon and Medusa vs. Akira Hokuto match, outside interference was used to break up a false finish in the former and set up the finish in the latter, in preliminary matches that really didn't need it since it was being used so often later in the show, other than as an easy out for the victory to be obtained in heel fashion. In the case of Diamond Dallas Page vs. Eddie Guerrero, the interference actually flattened out and left a dead finish to a match which had finally built up a lot of heat after a slow start. In the dark match opener, Mexican Minis Mascarada Sagrada and Octagon Cheeto beat Jurito Estrada and Piratita Morgan in 7 minutes when Sagrada pinned Morgan with a crucifix. I was told the four got over pretty well with the crowd and it was said to have been about a 2-star match. 1. Ultimo Dragon, Yoshihiro Asai, pinned Dean Malenko, Dean Simon, to win the WCW Cruiserweight title and unify it with the other 8 titles in the J Crown, IWGP Junior Heavyweight, NWA Junior Heavyweight, Great Britain Junior Heavyweight, WWA Junior Light Heavyweight, UWA Light Heavyweight, NWA Welterweight, WWF Light Heavyweight and War International Junior Heavyweight, in 1830. The plan coming out of all this is that Dragon will lose to Jushin Liger on January 4th at the Tokyo Dome and apparently win all 9 belts, however they'll do the deal. Don't you love it when Japan tries to copy American wrestling angles, that the contract was for 8 belts and not for 9, so Dragon will retain the WCW belt and then return to the US and drop that title alone so the WCW title isn't unified with the other 8 titles. This was nearly a perfectly flawless worked match, starting with good kicking by Dragon and mat wrestling by both. Dragon once again did the spot where he teased the tope, flipped back into the ring, and suddenly went for it and nailed Malenko on the floor. Dragon dominated early with mat wrestling. The announcers still weren't getting the submissions over. Malenko mainly used leg submission holds and Dragon would struggle to the ropes and break. Finally the two traded near falls with them building up a tremendous amount of heat, particularly since Dragon, who was the foreigner with Sonny Ono in his corner, played heel. After big move, Dragon hit the Asai moonsault, which announcer Mike Tenay had built up as the move that bears his real name, which is unique for American wrestling for the announcer to acknowledge the real name of a masked wrestler. They teased the double count out, but both got back in and Dragon missed the moonsault. Malenko put on the cloverleaf but Ono got on the apron and Malenko broke the hold to go after him. Dragon used a pile driver and Malenko a brainbuster and there were big pops as each kicked out of the moves. Finally, after a series of standing reversals, Dragon used the Tiger Suplex, reverse full Nelson grip taken over backwards into a German suplex, for the pin. It would be very hard to imagine a better technical pro wrestling match than this. 4.5 stars. 2. Akira Hokuto Hisako Uno, pinned Medusa, Deborah Michelli, to become the first WCW Women's Champion in 706. Hokuto came to the ring with both Kensuke Sasaki, her husband, and Ono. Nick Patrick did the heel ref bit, while Lee Marshall did commentary and referred to Hokuto's first name as Akita, which is a Russian dog. Ono tripped Medusa early to give Hokuto an early edge. Medusa tried a swinging DDT off the ropes and a Jimmy Del Rey style float over DDT, but both spots were very sloppy. Aside from that, it was a decent match, although Hokuto is nowhere close to what she once was, and quite frankly, neither is Medusa. Finish saw Ono hit Medusa with a flagpole, since Medusa came out with the American flag, and Hokuto used a missile dropkick and followed with her Northern Lights bomb finisher to win the title. 1.25 stars. Roddy Piper did an interview. To say this interview made no sense would be giving it more praise than it deserves. Piper once again proved he has the greatest interview charisma in the history of the business for his ability to simply say a bunch of things that make no sense, most of which have nothing to do with the storyline issue, and because of delivery, people still think it was a great interview. 3. Jushin Liger, Keiichi Yamada, pinned Rey Mysterio Jr. Oscar Gonzalez in 14-16 of the first ever meeting between the top high flyer in wrestling of the late 80s against the top high flyer of the mid-90s. Both Tony Schiavone and Mike Tenay did a great job of not only getting the historical aspect of this meeting over, but to tell the story of Liger's role in the evolution of flying wrestling and his recent brain tumor, treating him as something more than the stereotypical foreign heel role. The size difference between the two is amazing, particularly considering Liger by reputation is a tiny wrestler, although he looked to weigh at least 220. Mysterio Jr. needs to work with men close to his own size or the visual credibility aspect takes the match down a peg. Both worked hard and what they did was excellent, but there was something missing with Liger being mainly a mat wrestler these days due to injuries, and one of the best in the world at it, and Mysterio Jr. mainly being a flyer. It was acknowledged this was their first meeting except for working about 30 seconds in an 8-man tag match over the summer. Liger dominated with power moves including Chris Benoit-style power bombs. Mysterio Jr. is the best wrestler I've ever seen for the ability to actually have missed a move and be so agile as to recover in the middle of a miss and turn it into a hit. Liger suplexed Mysterio Jr. over the top to the floor and hit a killer powerbomb on the floor. He used the Romero special in the ring. Mysterio Jr. came back with a great German suplex and a springboard dropkick. He tried a second springboard move but Liger caught him in a perfectly timed dropkick. Liger used a released German suplex and followed with a dragon screw, and boy did the announcing go to hell when 10A called that move. Liger used a somersault Copo kick. Mysterio Jr. finally did an Osai moonsault, but off the top rope rather than the middle rope, and a springboard leg drop. After a series of near falls, Mysterio Jr. went for a springboard into a Frankensteiner off the top, but Liger landed on his feet and hit another Copo kick and a Liger bomb for the pin. 3 3/4 stars. 4. Jeff Jarrett pinned Chris Benoit in 13:48. Benoit was up to his usual standards and Jarrett hung with him. It was interesting to see that in Nashville that Benoit had at least as much if not more fan support. The two worked a fast-paced good match. At one point outside the ring woman distracted Jarrett allowing Benoit to blindside him. Finish of the match saw Jarrett go for the figure 4 but woman raked his eyes. At this point Arnold Anderson came to ringside and walked past woman and Benoit and went into Jarrett's corner. At this point Conan and Hugh Morris came to ringside to attempt to kidnap woman, and during the melee woman kicked Morris low. Kevin Sullivan then came out and Conan gave Sullivan a wooden chair which he broke on Benoit. At about the same time Anderson DDT'd Jarrett on the floor and Anderson threw him in the ring. Jarrett rolled and ended with his arm on top of Benoit's body for the 3 count. Arn and Woman argued after the match with Anderson telling Woman it was all her fault. Gene Okerlund then set to do an interview but all concerned parties from Sullivan to Anderson to Jarrett to Benoit and Woman all walked by him without saying a word. 3 1/2 stars. After all that, Steve and Deborah McMichael came out and said that Jarrett was horseman material but were running down Benoit and Woman. I recognize this opinion isn't shared by a lot of people, but when it comes to being a tag team on interviews, the McMichaels get better by the week and this was Deborah's best performance to date. 5. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash retained the WCW tag titles beating Meng, Yueli Fifita, and Barbarian Sanfalahi in 11:52. Nick Patrick was referee and would get down slow whenever Meng and Barbarian had Hall in a pinning position. Most of the match saw Hall worked on. At 1.6 got the megaphone from Jimmy Hart and chased him to the back. Hall finally made the hot tag. After a little brawling Barbarian missed a high kick to Nash and Nash jackknifed him for the pin. 1 star. 6. Eddie Guerrero pinned Diamond Dallas Page Falkenberg, to win the vacant U.S. title in 15:20. For whatever reason, and following Hall and Nash is the best one I can come up with, the crowd was dead for most of this match even though Page had the presence and charisma and Guerrero is one of the best workers around. Finally as the match picked up and they traded fast near falls and reversals, the crowd slowly got into it and it built into a pretty good match. In particular the final few minutes of the match were excellent. Page has done a great job getting his move over and finally went for the diamond cutter but Guerrero turned it into a backslide for a great near fall. After a collision which involved the dreaded referee bump, Hall, Nash and Six hit the ring and Hall gave Page the former Razor's Edge, which is now called the Outsider's Edge. Guerrero, who was on the floor, climbed to the top rope and scored the pin with a frog splash. In this case, the outside interference finish was a negative as the crowd was getting into their false finishes and crowd reactions went flat once the interference came. After the match, Hall, Nash and Six all went after Guerrero and he managed to fight them all up for a while before they finally overpowered him. 3 stars. 7. Lex Luger, Larry Fole, pinned the Giant, Paul White, in 13:23. Match itself wasn't much, although it was something to see Giant get up for a missed dropkick. Finish was really well put together and couldn't have worked better in someone's dreams. Luger finally knocked Giant down using a neckbreaker and went for a pin, but Giant kicked out and threw Luger onto ref Mark Curtis. Luger racked the Giant but Nick Patrick hit the ring and clipped Luger. Luger dropped Giant but didn't sell the clip. At this point Sting was shown in the crowd. Luger threw down Patrick and once again racked Giant and this time Six made the save with a spin kick. At this point Sting hit the ring and whispered something in both Luger and Giant's ear and dropped his baseball bat in the ring and left. Luger got to the bat first, but Giant got his foot on the bat before Luger could use it. Luger gave Giant a low blow, got the bat and hit him in the groin, the chest and the knee with the bat and scored the pin to a huge pop. They made a big deal about this match being the first NWO loss and began the tease for the Giant turn, saying that when the Giant was in trouble, instead of sending out Hall and Nash, they sent out Patrick and 6. 2 stars. 8. Roddy Piper, Roderick Toombs, beat Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, in 1536. Piper was as over in this match as anyone this side of Antonio Inoki would be. It was amazing to see the crowd wearing all the NWO t-shirts cheering Piper and universally booing Hogan. The two did the best they could, which wasn't very good, but the match was built up so well and the two have so much charisma that they didn't need to do anything. Piper looked noticeably older in the ring in this match than in his last WWF stint. Finish saw Hogan miss the leg drop and Giant came to ringside. Giant had Piper up for the choke slam but Piper escaped. At this point a fan hit the ring and Hogan and Randy Anderson began stomping him into the ground, but he wouldn't move until the cops dragged him out and I believe he was arrested. Piper then put Hogan in the sleeper and the ref checked Hogan, who was out, and awarded the match to Piper. Hall and Nash came out and Piper beat them up and ducked out. Hogan left with them teasing lots of tension between Giant and the rest of the NWO, with them blaming Giant for Hogan's loss. 1.5 star results. December 15th, Caguas, Puerto Rico, WWC, Invader No. 1 Kershawn Morley, Abdullah the Butcher b. Larry Hamilton, Puerto Rican title Ray Gonzalez b. Huracan Castillo Jr. to win held up title, Chicky Star and Buddy Landell b. El Profe and Jim Steele, taped fist match Skull Von Crush b. Black Feather. December 19th, Toluca, AAA y Mahan and Pequeño Rebelde b. Norteño and Blanco y Negro, Imperio Rojo and Zebra Jr. b. Nucleon and Estrella 2000 Discovery and Tornado b. Canai and Caras La Momia, Cibernetico and Alcon Antonio Olmos, Alcon Dorado Jr., the Perro Aguayo and Mascara Sagrada DQ. December 20th, Arecibo, Puerto Rico, WWA, 800, Gothic Knight b. Ray Antonetti, Rockin' Rico b. Sabucan, Vangador Boricua and Rockero b. Barabas Jr. and El Exotico, WWF IC title, Hunter Hurst Helmsleeker Savio Vega, Sid b. Sabucan and Antonetti and Rico and Knight, Dutch Mantle b. Pulgarcito, Puerto Rican title Jake Roberts b. El Bronco. December 22nd, Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Firito and Guerrero del Futuro b. Bracito de Oro and Mascara de Sagrada, Ione Jinjin and Buffalo Salvaje and Kundra b. Babe Richard and Alacron and Ultimatum, Chicago Express and Lynx and Reyes Veloz b. Atlantico and Jaguar and Olympus, Lismark Jr. and Olympico and Mascara Magica b. Felino and Mono Negra Sr. and Astro Ray Jr. DQ Silver King and Dos Caras and Mr. Niebla b. El Satanico and Scorpio Jr. and Andy Barrow. December 22nd, Roseville, Michigan, Insane Championship Wrestling, 350 Jimmy V. b. Brian Fury, Bones b. Rude Boy DQ Rhino Richards b. Christian Cage, Alexis Machine b. Dr. Maxwell Death Wolf b. Tony Smalls, American Kickboxer b. El Perro and Rick Wilde, Skinheads, WWF Headbangers, NC Sex and Violence, Hex Monroe b. Psycho Rick. December 24th, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, FMW, 835, Bunkhouse match Takamichi Noku and Wing Kanemura b. Dragon Winger and Hideki Hasaka, Hideo Makimura and Masato Tanaka and Hayabusa b. Gasaku Goshigawara and Hayato Nanjo and Tetsuhiro Kuroda. December 25th, Hakata Star Lanes, UWFI 2000 Matsui d. Kamiyama, Kazushi Sakuraba b. Hiromitsu Kanehara, Yoshihiro Takayama b. Kenichi Yamamoto, Masahito Kakihara b. Naoki Sano, Nobuhiko Takada and James Stone, Little Guido b. Billy Scott and Yoji Anjo. December 25th, Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, Babe Richard and Pegaso b. Kundra and Supremo 2, Mascara de Magica and Dorito and Ciclin Chito Ramirez b. Firito and Guerrero del Futuro and Damian Cito, Astro Ray Jr. and Karloff Lagarde Jr. and Chicago Express b. Solar and Olympico and Olympus, Rambo and Mono Negra Sr., and Black Warrior b. Dos Caras and Silver King and Brasso de Plata, CMLL middleweight title El Satanico b. Shocker. December 25th, Tokyo, Ballerts 200, Naohiro Hoshikawa b. Satoshi Yoniyama, Yuki Ishikawa b. Minoru Tanaka, Takeshi Ono and Katsumi Yujuda b. Alexander Otsuka and Ishikawa. December 26th, Chicago Rosemont Horizon WWF, 5449 Doug Furness and Phil LaFon b. Razor Ramon and Diesel 1/2 of 1 star, Crushed b. Sabio Vega Dead, Ahmed Johnson NC Goldust 1/2 of 1 star, WWF title. Sid B. Mankind 1 star, Farouk B. Mark Marrow 2 stars, Godwins and Bart Gunn B. Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith and Justin Bradshaw 2 stars, IC title Undertaker B. Hunter Hearst Helmsley DQ 1.5 star, Vader and Steve Austin B. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels 2.5 stars. December 26th Charksdale, Mississippi USWA 300 Don Bass B. Ken Wayne Tony Falk B. Flash Flanagan, Bill Dundee B. Sermo Mike Samples B. Stephen Dunn, Jerry Lawler and Brian Christopher B. Wolfie D. and Jamie Dundee. December 26th Kawasaki, Michinoku Pro/Battlerts, Jinsei Shinzaki B. Grand Naniwa, Taka Michinoku and Men's Teo and Dick Togu B. Now Hiro Hoshikawa and Super Delphin and Masato Yakashiji, Tiger Mask Sayama B. Shiryu, Daisuke Ikeda and Alexander Otsuka and Satoshi Yoneyama B. Katsumi Yujuda and Takeshi Ono and Minoru Tanaka, Great Sasuke and Yuki Ishikawa B. Gulliver 10 and 20. December 26th Tokyo Dome JD, 5,800/ part of major event, Jaguar Yokota B. Bloody Phoenix, Esther Moreno and Kuga and Linus Asuka B. Yoshiko Tamura and Kumiko Maikawa and Yumiko Hata. December 26th Bakersfield, California, Slammers, Mike Earhart B. El Espirito, Jimmy James B. Tyrone Little DQ, Bern Langdon B. Joy Boy, Hombre de Oro B. Spider Malloy, El Toro Bravo B. Jeff Lindbergh. December 27th Uniondale, New York, Nassau Coliseum, WWF, 9,107 Doug Furnace and Phil LaFon B. Razor Ramon and Diesel, Farouk B. Savio Vega, Ahmed Johnson B. Crush DQ Goldust B. Jake Roberts, Shawn Michaels Steve Austin Godwins and Bart Gunn B. Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith and Justin Bradshaw, Undertaker B. Vader DQ IC title, Hunter Hearst Helmsley B. Mark Marrow, WWF title Sid B. Mankind. December 27th Downingtown, Pennsylvania, ECW, 969 sellout, Chris Candido B. Mikey Whipwreck, Louis Piccoli B. Balls Mahoney, Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley B. Bad Crew, Gangstas B. D. Von Dudley and Axel Rotten, Stevie Richards B. GQ Quartermain ECW Tag Titles, Eliminators B. Sabu and Rob Van Dam, Pitbull No. 2 B. Brian Lee ECW title Raven B. Sandman, Tommy Dreamer and Beulah McGillicuddy B. Shane Douglas and Francine. December 27th Tokyo Korakuen Hall, UWFI, 2,200 sellout, Matsui D. Kamiyama, Naoki Sano B. James Stone, Yoji Andro B. Billy Scott, Kenichi Yamamoto and Masahito Kakihara B. Kazushi Sakuraba and Hiromitsu Kanehara, Nobuhiko Takada B. Yoshihiro Takayama. December 27th Memphis, USWA, Blaze B. Tony Falk, Kareem Olajuwon, Reggie B. Fine, B. Brickhouse Brown, USWA Tag Titles, Stephen Dunn and Flash Flanagan NC Mike Samples and Vic the Bruiser, Victor Lewis, Pedals Held Up, Jamie Dundee D. Bill Dundee, Unified Title, Jerry Lawler B. Akeem Mohammed, Big Black Dog, Concession Stand Brawl Brian Christopher and Lawler and Brown and Mabel and Dunn and Bill Dundee B. Mohammed and Elijahwan and Wolfie D. and Sermo and Don Bass and Jamie Dundee. December 27th Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL Tiger Cota and Fierro B. Kung Fu Jr. and Mono Negra Jr., Olympico and Alacron and Filoso B. Kundra and Reyes Velos and Lynx, Ultraman Jr. and Jaguar and Atlantico B. El Hijo del Gladiador and Archangel and Yone Jinjin, La Fiera and Brazo de Oro and Mr. Niebla B. Mocho Cota and Felino and Ray Bucanero, Bestia Salvaje and Scorpio Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. B. Dandy and Lismark Jr. December 27th Johnson City, Tennessee, Tennessee Mountain Wrestling, TCB Man D. Chris Steelheart, Dr. Dan and the Orderly B. Brian Wayne and Mike Powers, The Spoiler B. James Blevins DQ, Ricky Rocket Grady Golden, Buddy Landell B. 8-Ball Jones, Bunkhouse Buck and Mongolian Stomper B. Ricky Morton and Tracy Smothers. December 27th Baltimore, MD, Mid-Eastern Wrestling Federation, Cat Burglar B. Pretty Boy, Samoan Gangstas, Samu and Coco Samoa, B. Glenn Osborne and Dark Rebel, Chuck Williams, Joe Thunder B. Lucifer, Adam Flash DDQ Quinn Nash, Knuckles Sandwich and Clubber Lang, Ralph Soto, B. Earl the Pearl and Johnny Desire, Mark Schrader B. Devin Storm, Corporal Punishment B. Pablo Marquez, ECWL Puerto Ricano, Jimmy Cicero B. Jason Knight, Axel Rutten B. Schrader. December 27th Chalmette, Louisiana, Ultimate Wrestling Federation, 155, Casey Blaze B. Jerry Sawyer, Kevin Northcutt B. Marcel Pringle, DiBiase B. Wigger, Chris Adams and Robert Gibson B. Al Savage and Punisher, Blaze 1 Battle Royal. December 28th Providence, Rhode Island, WWF 4634 Doug Furnace and Phil LaFon B. Razor Ramon and Diesel, Farouk B. Savio Vega, Ahmed Johnson B. Crush DQ Goldust B. Jake Roberts, IC title, Hunter Hearst Helmsley B. Mark Marrow Godwins and Bart Gunn B. Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith and Justin Bradshaw. Undertaker B. Vader DQ, Shawn Michaels B. Steve Austin, WWF titles Sid B. Mankind. December 28, Allentown, Pennsylvania, ECW, 1300, Mikey Whipwreck B. Bad Crew, Pitbull 2 B. D. Von Dudley, Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley B. Balls Mahoney and Jimmy Cicero, Stevie Richards B. Axel Rotten, Brian Lee B. Louis Piccoli, Rob Van Dam B. Chris Candido. Eliminators beat Gangstas and Sabu and Van Dam in three-way dance to keep ECW tag titles. Tommy Dreamer and Beulah B. Shane Douglas and Francine, dog collar match for ECW title Raven B. Sandman. December 28, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, JWP, 2010 sellout, Tomoko Kuzumi B. Osugi, Candy Akutsu D. Saburo, Cutie Suzuki D. Fuseo Naochi, Mayumi Ozaki and Rieko Amano B. Plum Mariko and Hiromi Yagi, Devil Masami and Kanako Matoya B. Hikari Fukuoka and Esther Moreno, Ozaki and Amano B. Masami and Matoya to win tag team tournament, Dynamite Kansai B. Emi Motokawa. December 28, Girard, Ohio, IWA, 1000, TC Reynolds B. John Lawrence, Cody Michaels B. Milwaukee Mauler, Shiva AFI B. Giant Lumberjack, Frank Stiletto B. Lord Zoltan, Preston Steele and Malia Hasaka B. Iron Sheik and Debbie Combs. December 28, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Pro Wrestling America, 250, Scotty Z B. Chi-Town Thug, Jeff Warner B. Stiff Jackson, J.B. Trask B. Horace the Psychopath, Dan Jesser and Billy Blaze B. Hate Troopers, Wellington Wilkins Jr. B. Randy Gusto, Lenny Lane B. Great Sasuke Original. December 28, Staten Island, New York, Universal Superstars of America, 350, Mike Sharp 1 Battle Royal, Brittany Brown B. Brandy Alexander, El Mascarado B. Ken Sweeney, Nicole B. Magic, Chucky B. Kodiak Bear, Bodyguard for Hire B. Sharp. December 28, San Francisco, Incredibly Strange Wrestling, 450, El Jalapeno and El Psychotico B. Dr. Loco and Latin Stud Gran Fangoria B. Astro Zombie 2000 Missing Link. Not Original, B. El Homo Tonto Chris Cole B. El Demonio, Bill Calhoun B. Chicano Flame, La Chingona B. El Hijo del Punta and Magic Dragon, Slaughterhouse B. Fangoria DQ Border Patrol No. 1 B. El Flamingo. December 29, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, JD, 1400 One Night Rookies Tournament, Yoko Takahashi B. Miwa Kikia, Miho Wakizawa B. Miyuki Sagade, Rumi Sekiguchi B. Sachi Abe, Yuko Kasugi B. Fuji, Takahashi B. Wakizawa, Sekiguchi B. Kasugi, Takahashi B. Sekiguchi to win tournament, Yuki Lee and Chikako Shiratori and Jaguar Yokota B. Bloody Phoenix and Chiquita Azteca, Esther Moreno, and Pequeña Azteca, Alda Moreno, TWF Women's Title Linus Asuka B. Lola Gonzalez, Kuga B. Bison Kimura. December 29, Miami, Florida, Sunshine Wrestling Federation, 1200 Johnny Torres B. Bobby Davis DQ Cuban Assassin B. Madman Pondo, Luna Vachon B. Riptide, Demon Hellstorm B. Paul Adonis, Duke Dries B. Vampire Warrior, Chief White Eagle and Chief Little Lone Eagle B. J.R. James and Little Bad John, Dan Severn B. Joda, Foria. December 30th, Knoxville, Tennessee, WCW Monday Nitro Tapings, 4021, WCW Women's Title, Akira Hokuto Kermadusa 2 stars, Amazing French Canadians B. Public Enemy, WCW Cruiserweight Title, Ultimo Dragon B. Jushin Liger 3 stars, Strap Match Conan B. Mr. Wall Street, Hugh Morris B. Kensuke Sasaki DQ Harlem Heat B. Faces of Fear, Glacier B. Disco Inferno, Chris Benoit B. Chris Jericho 3¼ stars, Dean Malenko D. Rey Mysterio Jr. 3¾ stars, Lex Luger B. Greg Valentine. December 30th, Albany, New York, WWF Monday Night Raw Tapings, 6855, B. Mike Bell, Mankind B. Owen Hart, Doug Furnace and Phil LaFon B. Razor Ramon and Diesel, Mini Vader B. Mascarada Sagrada Jr., Bret Hart and Savio Vega B. Steve Austin and Farouk DQ, Hunter Hearst Helmsley B. Flash Funk, Jerry Lawler B. Goldust Core, Mike Bell B. Nick Barbary, Undertaker B. Crush DQ Lawler B. Tony DeVito, Vader B. Bret Hart WWF title Undertaker B. Sid DQ, Helmsley and Lawler B. Mark Marrow and Goldust DQ Rocky Maivia B. Davey Boy Smith Core, Shawn Michaels B. Steve Austin. Special thanks to Dan Paris, Michael Scarberry, Bart Orkline, Chuck Morris, Tammy Cave, Tadashi Tanaka, Ron Harris, Manuel Gonzalez, Lance Levine, Georgianne Macropoulos, Todd Neal, Eric Dahlberg, Dominic Valenti, Tim Harshman, David Stylianoff, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Tim Whitehead, Shane Hansen, Bill Brown, Ken Verrett, Bobby Baum, Christine Griskavich. Japanese Television Rundown. December 8, All Japan. 1. Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao won the World Tag League tournament, beating Mitsuharu Misawa and Jun Akiyama in 31-37. The last 22 minutes aired on television and it was a real classic, particularly from a psychology standpoint. It was almost as if the company had built the entire year into getting spots over for this match. The first major spot was Tao choke slamming Akiyama off the apron, basically meaning Misawa had to go against both of them. Tao used a tope on Misawa. Kawada dropped Misawa on his head, but Misawa still kicked out of the following power bomb. Tao used the choke slam and dynamic bomb, same as Liger bomb, on Misawa, but Akiyama awoke from the dead to make the save. They did a combination choke slam and back suplex, dropping Akiyama on his head. Tao then German suplexed Misawa on his head and Kawada backdropped Akiyama on his head again. They continued to get near falls on Misawa with big moves, including Tao using a choke slam again and Kawada using a high kick and a power bomb. Finally, Kawada power bombed Misawa again and finally got the 3 count. I wouldn't rate it as the best match of the year, but it was very close to that level. 5 stars. December 14th. All Japan Women. 1. This was taped from the December 8th major show at Sumo Hall. In the TV opener, Ri Tamada retained her All Japan Women's title, pinning Chikako Shiratori of the JD promotion in 10:27 with a dragon suplex. It was edited down to 5 minutes on television. Based on TV, the match was the typical fast-paced style, but not much in the way of heat or psychology. They did a lot of near falls, but the execution in some ways was reminiscent of the Medusa Hokuto match. 1 1/4 stars. 2. Chaparita Asari retained her WWA Super Lightweight title, pinning Fuseo Naochi of JWP in 14:34. This was also edited to about 5 minutes for television. Lots of flying moves early, building to the near falls. The last several minutes had a lot of heat and was good, ending with Asari using a new form of a small package for the pin. Asari also attempted a new move, which Naochi moved on, which was a combination of a Scorpio Splash but with a spin thrown in, kind of like a face-forward Sky Twister press. 3 1/4 stars. 3. In a shoot match under kickboxing rules, Yoko Takahashi of the JD promotion beat Saya Endo via decision after 3 3-minute rounds. Only round 3 aired on television. It was evident neither women had done much in the way of kickboxing, but they were aggressive and in great condition in that they weren't tired in the way novices, and even experienced fighters sometimes usually are when doing kickboxing. Takahashi won the round and got the unanimous decision, which based on what aired appeared to have been fair. 4. In a 5-round shoot match under Muay Thai rules, Aya Mitsui, a Muay Thai champion, beat Kumiko Maekawa. This result was wrong in the Observer a few weeks ago, as we printed Maekawa won the match. Only the 5th round aired on television, and both women were tons better than the women in the previous match. The crowd was really into it because it was a competitive high-level match. Mitsui won the unanimous decision, but Maekawa easily won the final round with lots of impressive high kicks in particular. The Japanese crowd, which never boos decisions even when they are bad, booed all 3 judges after forgiving the match to Mitsui, which gives the impression perhaps Maekawa was robbed. A real good final round. 5. Kaoru Ito defeated a woman I only know of as Malitza in 51 seconds under Vale Tudo, basically UFC rules. Malitza was a kickboxer and Ito managed to get behind her and do a Tank Abbott-like takedown with her and grab the armbreaker immediately. 6. Rosina Alina, a Soviet women judo heavyweight who placed second in her country's Olympic trials and is considered world-class in judo, once again defeated Yumiko Hata in another shoot match under Vale Tudo rules in 4:29. The first 2:30 was the two on their feet basically doing boxing. Hata was definitely getting the better of her much larger opponent. Then Hata made the fatal mistake of throwing the kick, which Alina saw and immediately tackled her. Alina was working for the arm immediately and finally got the arm breaker for the submission. The shoot matches came off better than they usually do on women's pro wrestling shows because fans have become more educated to the various styles. 7. Asia Kong and Dynamite Kansai beat Mariko Yoshida and Takako Inoue in 1915 when Kansai pinned Takako with the Splash Mountain. About 12 minutes aired on television and it was a very good match, particularly a great build toward the finish. Early on, Yoshida and Inoue did a double tope. Lots of good near falls at the end with some good heat. Only some minor sloppiness kept it from reaching the 4-star level. 3 3/4 stars. Kyoko Inoue pinned Manami Toyota in 24:52 to win the WWA title. This was named Match of the Year in the AJW 1996 awards and was a great climactic match for the year. There were 2 problems early that kept it from being a Match of the Year. But it was a fantastic match anyway. Early on, Kyoko got poked in her left eye and she had to slow the match down for a few seconds and was a little sluggish even for minutes after. The other negative was Toyota doing a series of springboard moves outside the ring, losing her balance on the top rope twice in a row. About 17:15 aired on television, and Toyota's matches always lose something from a context standpoint when they're edited, so this was probably even better than it appeared on television. At one point, Kyoko slammed Toyota off the top rope Flair style, but instead of Toyota taking the bump in the ring, she took it to the floor. The springboard spots started out with Toyota apparently wanting to do her regular springboard somersault plancha, but she tripped while landing on the top rope, and actually regained her balance enough to change the move into a crossbody, but landed badly and hurt her knee a little bit on landing. She then grabbed a table and put Kyoko on it, then went to do a springboard somersault plancha through the table, but again tripped on the rope and fell in the ring. She went to do the move again and slightly lost her balance on the rope, but still pulled the move off and landed on Kyoko through the table, and it bent in half. The problem with the spot is obviously, since she missed the spot the first time, Kyoko had to lie on the table selling for way too long. From that point on, it was match of the year caliber. Toyota invented two new moves. The first was setting Kyoko up for what appeared to be a die-hard splash mountain, razor's edge off top, but did the move using her legs rather than her arms for a near fall. The second was when Kyoko did a power slam off the top rope, and in midair Toyota turned it into a small package. Both pulled out every move in their repertoire, and their big moves several times to get near falls. Finally, Kyoko used a German suplex, her favorite Niagara driver, for a near fall, and then finished with what could be called a rack bomb, torture rack dropped into a power bomb. 4 3/4 stars. Puerto Rico. WWC ran a pay-per-view show in Puerto Rico, which was, I believe, a taped show of the 1996 anniversary show, with Carlos Colon versus El Bronco in a retirement versus deportation match, Miguel Perez versus Huracán Castillo Jr. for the Puerto Rican title, Invader No. 1 versus Chiqui Star, Invaders No. 2 and No. 3 versus Southern Posse from Florida, Abdullah the Butcher versus Ron Harris of the Bruise Brothers and Ricky Santana, and Ray Gonzalez defending the WWC tag titles against Dan Crawford and Doug Furnas. Coming into Puerto Rico for shows over the first weekend of 1997 include Buddy Landel, Eric Shelley, son of Len Shelley, which probably means nothing to almost anyone, Abdullah the Butcher, and the return of Ron Starr. Butcher faces Landel on January 4th in Ponce, Puerto Rico, and headlines challenging Colon for the Universal title on January 6th in Caguas. Also in Caguas was Invader No. 1 versus Sean Morley, Perez versus Nene, Castillo versus Chiqui Star, Gonzalez versus Landel for the Puerto Rican title, Santana and Black Feather versus D'Lo Brown and Skull Von Crush, and Shelley versus Ron Starr. Gonzalez won the WWC Puerto Rican title, which had been held up, beating Castillo on December 15th in Caguas when Chiqui Star's interference backfired. The rival WWA ran on December 20th in Arecibo, drawing 800 fans for a tour which included WWF wrestlers Savio Vega, Sid, Jake Roberts, Dutch Mantle, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The tour was building to a title versus title match with WWA champ Vega facing Sid, which no doubt ended in some sort of a no decision. On the Arecibo show, Helmsley retained the IC title, going to a double count-out with Vega in a match with Dave Heckner from the WWF as referee. Sid was scheduled to defend the WWF title against Duke Dries, who no-showed, and it was announced he suffered some sort of an accident. Sid was in the ring, and a series of jobbers, Sakukan, Ray Antonetti, Rockin' Rico, and Gothic Knight, all hit the ring, and Sid powerbombed all of them. Jake Roberts, who holds the Puerto Rican title, retained the belt, pinning El Bronco after a DDT. However, Bronco beat Roberts for the title on December 21st in Caguas, and Barrabas Jr. beat Rockero to win the WWA lightweight title on the same show. Don't have the result of the title versus title match between Sid and Savio Vega, however neither title changed hands, so assume it was a double count out. Don't have Caguas attendance either, however the December 19th show in San German with the same WWF talent, Vega, Sid, Roberts, Mantle, Helmsley, drew 600. They announced that coming to this promotion in 1997 will be Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and Undertaker. EMLL. It's the traditionally slow season, and EMLL generally uses this time to build up new stars. I can recall in the past that late December/early January have been used over the past 2 or 3 years to really push wrestlers like Hector Garza, Shocker, Astro Ray Jr., and whomever is the hot young wrestler in that period. There doesn't appear to be a standout this year, as the December 27th Arena Coliseo show was headlined by Bestia Salvaje and Scorpio Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. beating Dandy and Lismark Jr. when Salvaje pinned Lismark Jr. after a low blow, and they did the post-match hair versus mask challenges. They also ran Arena Coliseo on December 25th with El Satanico retaining his CMLL middleweight title beating Shocker. Wagner is again leaving for Japan on December 29th. Pena's Super Luchas magazine named Wagner as CMLL Wrestler of the Year. They teased a Silver King feud with La Fiera on December 20th. Panico, who is one of the Emerald Road agents, said that the Hector Garza jump and appearance in WWF came as such a shock to the promotion that he didn't even know about it until December 17th, which would have been the day after Garza worked the Raw tapings. Rayo de Jalisco Jr. had ankle surgery and won't be back until the February EMLL Japan tour. Promo Azteca. The major show of the week was December 27th in Zacatecas with Conan and La Parca and Tarzan Boy vs. Juventud Guerrera and Pirata Morgan and Universo 2000 as the main event, but we don't have any details. Conan will be running shows every Sunday in Mexico City at El Cortillo Bull Ring starting on January 5th, with the first show having Conan and Parca and Tarzan Boy vs. Guerrera and Psicosis and Morgan on top. AAA. Probably the biggest news is something that hasn't happened, but it is strongly being hinted in the local wrestling magazines that AAA is in trouble of losing its television. Televisa has increased the Sunday morning show to 4 hours, which appears to say that AAA is safe as you need 2 different promotions to fill that many hours. However, the magazines are reporting that Televisa is unhappy with the deterioration of the AAA product and the dinosaurs on top replacing the wrestlers that jumped to Azteca. In particular, the company was unhappy about spending years building up the younger wrestlers only to see them, now that they're over, working for the rival network. The plan now is to put Heavy Metal and Hector Garza and Latin Lover as a regular trio called Las Máquinas del Amor, or the Love Machines, I guess as a tribute to Art Barr. Heavy Metal is now part of a famous Mexican rock band called Heavy Nopal. Around 1993, when the band was really hot, it was a big deal when they'd go to the matches in Mexico City to cheer Heavy Metal on. Volador, who has been out of action since a February car accident that was originally thought to be career-ending, is set to return next month. AAA is talking about running its first major show of the year in February for the second Champion of Champions Cup, and targeting May for the beginning of Triple Manias and August to run a major show at the Los Angeles Sports Arena. Japan. The traditional biggest show of the year takes place at the Tokyo Dome on January 4th. This will probably be the largest crowd in the history of pro wrestling ever drawn solely through tradition. Most of your big crowds have been drawn usually from a killer main event or sometimes a hot promotion putting on a killer card when it comes to depth. This show has neither but will still probably draw close to or even in excess of 50,000 fans. Main event is Shinya Hashimoto defending the IWGP title against Riki Choshu, plus the expected title switch with Jushin Liger winning what I'd guess would be 9 belts from Ultimo Dragon since the WCW Cruiserweight is in the mix. With that title win, Dragon is the only person in pro wrestling history that I know of ever to hold world titles in Mexico, Japan and the United States simultaneously. Vader held heavyweight titles in Europe, Mexico and Japan at the same time many years back. Most of the Dome undercard consists of Big Japan versus New Japan interpromotional matches, but Big Japan is hardly what UWFI was when it comes to being a major league office with named talent. The mystery opponent for Koji Kanemoto still hasn't been mentioned, but rumor has it that it'll be Chris Jericho, which would be Jericho's New Japan debut. New Japan, since 1997 will be its 25th anniversary year, is planning more major shows than ever before, as talk right now is of doing a show at the new Osaka Dome on May 3rd, the Nagoya Dome in early October, and the Fukuoka Dome in November, not to mention the G1 at Sumo Hall for 5 nights in August. UWFI ran its final 2 shows on December 25th in Hakata before 2000 and December 27th at Korakuen Hall before a sellout 2,200 using James Stone and Billy Scott as the foreigners. The first show built up the finals of a tournament, won by Yoshihiro Takayama, to earn a match with Nobuhiko Takada the second night, which Takada won. Nippon TV aired an All Japan special on December 26th airing the top 5 matches as voted by the fans of 1996. The top 5 were the Kenta Kobashi Triple Crown title win over Akira Tao on July 24th, the tag tourney finals with Mitsuharu Misawa and Jun Akiyama vs. Tao and Toshiaki Kawada on December 6th, the Kawada vs. Kobashi 60 minutes draw on October 18th, the Misawa and Akiyama beating Kawada and Tao for the tag titles on May 23rd, and the early July match with Misawa and Akiyama losing the tag titles to Steve Williams and Johnny Ace. December 7th New Japan television show drew a 2.5 rating, while the December 8th All Japan show with the tag tourney finals drew a 4.2. Caught the last Rings and Pancrase shows for December 21st and December 15th respectively. It appeared that the Yoshihisa Yamamoto vs Kiyoshi Tamura semifinal in the Battle Dimension tournament was either a shoot, or these two are the two best workers in the entire business today, and Tamura isn't all that far from that level in some ways, and a great shoot match at that. The other semifinal with Volkan vs Bitsade Terriel was definitely not a shoot nor a good match. Maurice Smith's match on the show against Bitsade Milan appeared to be neither a shoot nor a good match either. The match where Masakatsu Funaki won the vacant King of Pancrase title beating Jason DeLucia was almost completely standing up. They were pretty even, mainly kicking each other until Funaki kicked DeLucia's lower leg and it was clear he hurt him because DeLucia immediately got pissed off, which he never does, and was favoring it big time and was put away fairly quickly after the telling blow. Gong Magazine came out with its awards naming Kenta Kobashi as Wrestler of the Year and the Shinya Hashimoto vs Nobuhiko Takada match from the Tokyo Dome on April 29th as Match of the Year. The November 29th match from the Tag Team Tournament with Misawa and Akiyama vs Tao and Kawada was named Tag Match of the Year. Tao Akiyama and Satoshi Kojima of New Japan also received awards, although I'm not sure exactly what for, but I'd get in the case of the latter two something along the lines of Most Improved. Kyoko Inoue was named Woman Wrestler of the Year, while Yuki Kondo of Pancrase was the obvious winner for Rookie of the Year. In a surprise, JWP named 21-year-old second-year pro Tomoko Kuzumi as its Wrestler of the Year. The surprise is because Kuzumi has hardly been pushed as a main eventer in a group where Dynamite Kansai has been the traditional top star probably since the group's inception. They named the April 11th Mayumi Ozaki vs Commando Borishoy match as Match of the Year. Kuzumi is generally thought of as being the best of the younger Japanese women wrestlers, although as with most of the younger ones, she's very small. Satoru Sayama has reached some sort of a business arrangement with Antonio Inoki, which, if you follow history, is an irony of a great degree. It's funny the directions life takes people, in particular people like Sayama and Inoki. I don't even know if I'd be shocked if Vince McMahon were to hire back Kevin Wacholz. Okay, maybe I'd be shocked about that one. Inoki is working on promoting a show in Cuba in 1997 and has a meeting with Fidel Castro. No, I'm not making this one up, about it on January 9th. Big Japan President Shinya Kojika said that he wants to sign two of the younger wrestlers from the now-defunct UWFI to work with each other and for his group to present a UWFI-style match on every card. Speaking of UWFI, some statistics that are really quite impressive. Since the group formed in 1991, over its 6-year history it promoted 64 shows and drew 585,724 fans, or 9,152 fans per show. I wonder if there has ever been a promotion in pro wrestling history that averaged that many fans per show over a 6-year period. I'd almost be sure that has never happened before. And the funny part of the story is, despite all that, the company, at least over the past 2 years, was running deeply in debt and went out of business. JD Promotions ran its final show of the year on December 29th at Korakuen Hall before 1,400. They did what was probably an angle which was really weird. The advertised main event on the show was Lioness Asuka defending her TWF Women's title against former champ Lola Gonzalez. The angle is that when Asuka got to the building, she was told by the company president that the match would be the semifinal and that Bison Kimura vs Kuga, Miori Kamiya, was being moved to the main event. The angle, or maybe it wasn't an angle, is that Asuka blew up and punched the president and said she was quitting the promotion when her contract expires in 2 weeks. Asuka beat Gonzalez to keep the title while Kuga beat Kimura to earn the next title shot on January 15th at Korakuen Hall. If Asuka is leaving, then you'd have to figure on her dropping the title on the next show. JWP ran its final show of the year on December 28th at Korakuen Hall, drawing a sellout 2010 with Mayumi Ozaki and Rieko Amano winning the year-end tag team tournament, beating Devil Masami and Kanako Matoya in the finals. Dynamite Kansai beat IWA wrestler Emi Motokawa in the main event. The new promotion Triple Times F looks to be down before it's even gotten off the ground. The wrestlers didn't get their paychecks the past 2 weeks and only 100 tickets have been sold for the debut card at Korakuen Hall, and apparently Korakuen Hall hasn't been paid the advance money for the January 10th show and they are in danger of losing the date. The new IWA, which debuts in late January, has signed the Great Kabuki, at 48 years old, to be its top star. USWA: The story about Jerry Jarrett selling his 50% of the company to Jerry Lawler is confirmed. Lawler appears to be running the business end of USWA along with Larry Burton, who is general manager of the promotion, and Elliot Pollock, a legitimate sports agent, who is USWA commissioner. Jarrett has been devoting almost all his time to business other than pro wrestling, so his selling really isn't as big a deal other than symbolically in that he was the last of the Mohicans, so to speak, the last remaining promoter from the late 70s early 80s era of regional wrestling to finally be out of the ownership end of the business. Spellbinder Del Rios has returned as part of the Nation of Domination using the ring name of Elijah. They are building up a feud that everyone was waiting for: Mo versus Mabel. Mo did an interview saying that he taught Mabel everything he knows, which is nothing I'd be bragging about, and said that Mabel had gotten lazy. He still asked Mabel to join the Nation of Domination, and it wound up with a pull-apart. Mabel and Bill Dundee and Brian Christopher and Lawler are now called the Dream Team to feud with the Nation of Domination. Insert your own Dream Team joke. The USWA tag titles were held up after the December 27 Memphis show match with Stephen Dunn and Flash Flanagan versus Mike Samples and Vic the Bruiser, Victor Lewis, and the rematch was scheduled on the January 1 Memphis show. The January 1 show had Queen Moisha, formerly Miss Texas, versus Miss USWA, the tag title match, Bill Dundee versus Jamie Dundee in a no DQ match, a fan's dream match in which a fan can put together any match he wants to see, Wolfie D versus Brian Christopher in a ladder match, Mo versus Mabel, and Lawler defending the unified title against Elijah. Lawler made a crack about Moisha, saying that when she comes out the least she could do is leave the price tag off of her. ECW. It was a big weekend for business with the December 27th show in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, drawing a sellout 969 fans paying $14,735, which is considerably up from the previous show, and December 28th in Allentown, Pennsylvania drew in excess of 1,300 fans and $20,000, which may have been the biggest non-ECW arena crowd for the company ever in Pennsylvania. At the Allentown show, Raven kept the ECW title, beating Sandman after using an object on him. They did a spot to tease a title change where Stevie Richards came in to superkick Sandman and instead, on purpose, superkicked Raven. From what I gather, it was just a spot the two came up with to make people think the title was going to change and a turn was going to happen, but at least at this point that wasn't a turn, although everyone in the building probably thought it was. Eliminators kept the tag titles, winning a three-way dance over Sabu and Rob Van Dam and Gangstas. Rob Van Dam beat Chris Candido in a match where Louis Piccoli came out after a ref bump wearing a referee shirt after Shane Douglas had given Candido a chain. When Candido got mad at the ref for not getting down fast enough on the count, it was Spicolli, and Spicolli hit him with the Death Valley driver and Van Dam scored the pin. Taz, who I believe is out of action due to shoulder surgery, which is why they're doing the gimmick that he's boycotting wrestling, once again challenged Sabu and they did a pull-apart. The return to Revere, Massachusetts this coming weekend is said to be a sure sellout. Both shows were reported to us as being good house shows. Tommy Dreamer and Beulah beat Shane Douglas and Francine on both shows as well. Upcoming lineups are January 10th in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania was Raven and Richards versus Sandman and Dreamer, Douglas defending the TV title against Spicolli, and Eliminators defending the ECW tag titles against Candido and Lee. January 11th at ECW Arena has Douglas defending the TV title against Dreamer, Terry Funk versus Brian Lee, and Spicolli versus Candido. January 17th at the Tabor Youth Association building in Northeast Philadelphia has Raven and Douglas versus Dreamer and Pitbull No. 2, Sandman versus Balls Mahoney, Eliminators versus Dudleys, Gangstas versus Axel Rotten and Devon Dudley, and Candido versus Whipwreck. And January 18th in Scranton, Pennsylvania at the Catholic Youth Center, which is a longtime WWF building, has Raven versus Sandman, Dreamer and Beulah versus Douglas and Francine, Pitbull No. 2 versus Lee, Eliminators versus Gangstas, Candido versus Whipwreck, and Dudleys versus Axel Rotten and Devon Dudley. Here and there. Omer Marchessault, a famous Montreal villain in the 40s and for years later, he was the top referee in the golden age of Montreal wrestling, passed away on Christmas night at the age of 83. Marchessault worked with the likes of Yvonne Robert, Buddy Rogers, Killer Kowalski, Pat O'Connor, Luthez, Bobby Manigoff, Edward Carpentier Jacques, and Johnny Raju, the Sheik, and Mad Dog Vachon. A pretty lengthy obit appeared in the sports section of the Montreal Gazette, noting Marchessault as the referee in two of the most famous matches ever in the city, a 1972 match before a record 20,347 fans at the Old Montreal Forum headlined by Gene Fair, Andre the Giant's original ring name, working the Montreal promotion before he left and become an international globetrotter under his more well-known moniker, versus Don Leo Jonathan, and a 1973 baseball stadium show headlined by Mad Dog Vachon versus Kowalski that drew 29,000. At the WWF's final show at the Montreal Forum, the WWF presented Marchessault and Bob Langevin with plaques to commemorate being involved in pro wrestling for 6 decades. The television show Ring Warriors, which is a European market show that basically does Americanized composites of old and new New Japan tapes, will start producing a weekly internet television show beginning on February 1st. Computer users will be able to view the program using a video player downloaded through the Ring Warriors website. The show will air continuously every hour on the hour for 7 days, with a new program put up a week later. Gordon Soley, Sir Oliver Humperdinck and Bruno Sammartino will be the broadcast team for the show. The show, located at ringwarriors.com, will be available for 1 year on a free trial basis and will probably become a paid programming item in 1998. We've got some notes on Steve Nelson's Unified Shoot Wrestling Federation out of Amarillo. Nelson started the promotion in August, with his first show drawing 1,200 fans at the old Amarillo Sports Arena, the weekly home of Amarillo wrestling in the Funk's heyday through the 70s, with Nelson beating James Stone, ECW's Little Guido, to win the promotion's middleweight title. The second show was on November 2nd at the Coliseum and drew 4,000 fans for a 19-match show that included Dan Severn vs. Geza Coleman Jr., which is a phenomenal crowd for an independent promotion. The third show will be a 17-match card on January 4th back at the smaller sports arena with Nelson facing Clinton Burke, a two-time NCAA place winner and 4-time world medalist in Samba wrestling. He's using mainly former college and Samba wrestlers in shoot matches. Nelson said that the fans come to see a good fight since there is no other live pro wrestling coming to Amarillo and that he draws from a combination of both boxing and wrestling fans and doesn't have any big-name pro wrestlers booked for the upcoming show. He does matches in 4 weight divisions, 145s, 170s, 200s and unlimited. The rules are essentially the same as Pancrase rules. Sabu no-showed the December 27th show in Gastonia, North Carolina, where he was scheduled against Rob Van Dam. The promotion told the fans Sabu simply no-showed and put Barbarian against Van Dam instead. Great Sasuke and Wellington Wilkins Jr. of Michinoku Pro Wrestling both worked shows over the weekend in the Minneapolis area for Pro Wrestling America. On December 28th in Minneapolis before 250 fans, Sasuke put over Lenny Lane, who has worked for MPW in Japan of late, while Wilkins beat local wrestler Randy Gusto. Sunshine Wrestling Federation in Florida drew 1,200 on December 29th with Dan Severn over Joe DeForia in the main event. IPW has a show on January 11th in New Britain, Connecticut at the Sports Palace with Jimmy Snuka vs. Kevin Sullivan as the main event with 911 Brick Bronski, Devon Storm and Reckless Youth among others underneath. Ian Rotten's group in Louisville called the IWA drew its record crowd on December 26th, drawing 312 fans using the headlining gimmick that the USWA is sending in wrestlers to run the promotion out of business and used Tracy Smothers and Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton as the USWA heels against locals Ian Rotten and Madman Pondo and Doug Gilbert in the main event. Fans were told to bring Christmas ornaments to ringside for the wrestlers to use in the match. There is something to the feud between the two groups since starting January 2nd, USWA is moving its weekly shows from Tuesday to Thursday to go head-to-head. Jada George, and promoter and ring announcer for Oklahoma Independent Promotions, died on December 20th at the age of 31 from colon cancer. The local area wrestlers are organizing a show for next month to help the family pay for medical and burial expenses. Want to send out public condolences this week to Georgianne Macropolis on the loss of her sister. NHB. Victor Belfort Gracie signed his contract to appear on the next UFC pay-per-view at about 4 a.m. on December 31st. At this point, the 4-man heavyweight tournament looks to be Gracie, Scott Ferrazzo, kickboxer Jim Mullen and Bob Marowitz has been negotiating on and off the past week plus with Ken Shamrock. The word we've gotten is that Shamrock is training as if he will fight in February, although the sides aren't close on money and nobody is giving me the impression the odds of it actually happening are high. Shamrock's hand will be healed enough to fight by February. We're told that the Dan Severn vs. Mark Coleman main event is signed, sealed and delivered. Belfort Gracie, who is 19 years old, if you are to believe the rumors, has the potential to be the best fighter of this era. He's skilled at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and is being touted as the best boxer of all the Brazilians, and his boxing coach, who used to coach Oscar de la Hoya, is supposedly claiming he's so adept in boxing he could win an Olympic gold medal in it. We shall see, and perhaps quickly, because an idea floating on the table would be to put him in against Shamrock first round, as that's the match the Shamrock camp was pretty well approached with doing. Richard Hamilton filed a $250,000 breach of contract lawsuit against Coleman. Coleman has finally started training after being down with a bug he caught in Brazil since late October. WCW. Monday Nitro on December 30th from Knoxville, Tennessee, with 4,021 paying $49,321, opened with the first tease of the Giant turn. As the NWO is arriving, Giant asked Hogan for the title shot since he won at World War III. Hogan told him they were all family and kind of put him off and acted like since Giant won the Battle Royal, now they could all relax and make movies and Hogan didn't have to worry about defending the title. Hogan kind of hinted he'd give Giant a shot but not at this point and said that Giant dropped the ball last night when he didn't take out Piper during the finish of their match. They tried to put too many people on television, 10 matches in total, and thus most of the matches were either great matches that were rushed or awful matches that were rushed. Amazing French Canadians beat Public Enemy in 329, awful match that was rushed, when they used Le Cannonball on Rock after Rock and Grunge both went through a table after Jacques Rougeau moved. Ultimo Dragon defended only the WCW Cruiserweight title against Jushin Liger, winning in 440 with a Tiger Suplex. Of all the great Japanese workers and Mexican workers who have come to the United States, Dragon picked up the knack of working American style faster than anyone. He's not over that much because of a lack of exposure, but I'm not sure he's not the best worker in the entire country at this point. Could have been a classic but too short. Conan was supposed to wrestle Big Bubba in a strap match but Bubba wasn't there and Mr. Wall Street took his place. Finish was the same as in every strap match in history where the loser drags the winner around to 3 turnbuckles and the winner also is tapping the buckle. Then the loser makes a mistake and the winner flies into the buckle. Match only went 242 and wasn't good. Wall Street left Conan laying afterwards. Hogan did an interview with Eric Bischoff where both said that Hogan had won the match with Piper the previous night and Hogan said he took it easy on Piper because one of Piper's kids begged him not to be too hard on his dad. Hugh Morris beat Kensuke Sasaki in a 440 of a time waster via DQ. Morris used the moonsault but Sonny Ono interfered hitting Morris with the flagpole. Morris attacked Ono after the match. Match sucked. Harlem Heat beat Faces of Fear in 332. Rob Parker came out and threw powder in Stevie Ray's eyes so Meng had him pinned. Sherry attacked Parker. Booker T came off the top on Meng's back and reversed the pile giving Heat the win. Sucked. Diamond Dallas Page did an interview all dejected and not saying much and said the NWO is too strong and hinted he was joining the NWO, which I guess means that he isn't. Glacier beat Disco Inferno in 417 in a match that was really bad even by the standards set earlier in the show. Chris Benoit pinned Chris Jericho with a backwards superplex in 4 minutes. This was an excellent match, only too short. Then came the Horseman soap opera segment. Deborah McMichael started beating Nice to Woman, but Woman came back and started yelling at her and Steve. Arnold Anderson wasn't there. Jeff Jarrett came out. The McMichaels said that Jarrett should be a horseman and not Benoit. Don't the McMichaels have the greatest job in wrestling? They get to dress up for interviews and since Steve can't wrestle, instead of teaching him, he just never wrestles. Benoit said that after last night he realized Jarrett was good enough to be anything he wanted in wrestling except a horseman. Deborah had the final line saying that Nancy was just upset because of her weight gain over the holidays. Mexican Minis Mascara de Sagrada and Octagonchito beat Jurito Estrada and Piratita Morgan in 221. It was way too short to get anything accomplished, particularly after selling the match almost the entire show. Rey Mysterio Jr. and Dean Malenko went to a 10-minute straw that actually was 9:21. Crowd heat was down for this match until the last few minutes when they did so many near falls that looked to be the finish. The work was their usual excellent level. Last night saw Lex Luger over Greg Valentine with the rack in 242. The show ended with the big angle. Roddy Piper showed up and thanked the fans and said the previous night was his last fight. Hogan and Bischoff came out and began insulting Piper and Hogan squared off when the entire NWO came out and destroyed Piper. Giant was just standing there while the rest of the guys, in particular Hall, Nash, Six, and Scott Norton, destroyed him while Hogan feasted on the bones so to speak. Hogan did a few chair shots to Piper's bad hip and they carried Piper out on a stretcher and took him away in an ambulance. Before they got rid of Piper they gave him to Giant to choke slam him but Giant refused. Hogan got mad at Giant and slapped him in the face. Giant then grabbed Hogan around the throat and wouldn't let go until Hogan promised to give him a title match. Hogan promised to give him the match and got out of the ring all staggered and told all the guys to attack Giant, which they did and Hogan hit him several times with the title belt and they left Giant laying. Fans threw tons of garbage into the ring during this angle which was a great angle. There was enough great stuff on the show to make it a good television show, but there was so much needless stuff crammed in. When Bubba wasn't there, why did Conan have to wrestle Wall Street when there wasn't enough time for the quality matches on the show to begin with? And what was the storyline purpose of the Canadians and Public Enemy, or Hugh Morris versus Kensuke Sasaki? Because of the holidays, ratings are delayed so we don't have the December 30th numbers yet. For December 23rd, Nitro did a 3.1 rating and 5.2 share which was a 2.9 first hour and 3.3 seconds hour. Raw did its worst mark in history, not only for a Raw show but the lowest for any Monday Night Wrestling show dating back to TNT and Primetime Wrestling in the early 80s, doing a 1.5 rating and 2.6 share. Nitro more than doubled Raw's rating overall, and nearly doubled it in the head-to-head hour. In fact, Nitro Replay, which did a 1.6 rating and 3.5 share, actually beat the initial showing of Raw. Some demographics for the December 23rd show when it comes to the head-to-head hour. In women 18 to 49, Nitro had a 66 to 34 edge, or almost double. In men 18 to 49, Nitro had a 71 to 29 edge, which tells the entire story really. Among kids, Raw led with a 56 to 44 edge while Nitro beat out Raw among teenagers by a 55 to 45 margin. For the weekend of December 28th to 29th, Main Event did a 1.1, the Year in Review Saturday Night Show did a 2.4 and Pro did a 1.7. On Nitro, when Piper is being carried out on the stretcher, and he's screaming words that don't appear to make sense, it is actually part of an angle in that he's talking in his childhood Gaelic and whatever he's saying is part of the storyline for his return. In the Associated Press balloting for Athlete of the Year, won by Michael Johnson, Ric Flair received 2 votes. This actually became a story in Canada because Donovan Bailey didn't get any votes, and he's something of a national hero there, and several media outlets picked up on the idea that their national hero didn't get any votes and a pro wrestler got 2 votes. What we have for the NWO pay-per-view show on January 25th in Cedar Rapids, Iowa is Hogan vs. Giant for the title, Hall and Nash defending the tag titles against the Steiners, Eddie Guerrero defending the U.S. title against Six in a ladder match, Masahiro Chono vs. Chris Jericho, and Marcus Bagwell vs. Scotty Riggs. I believe there will be 1 or 2 more matches. The January 21st clash in Milwaukee was originally set for Hogan and Giant as a tag team against Luger and Arnold Anderson, and that's where the Giant turn, it was going to happen. And if it wasn't going to happen, they'd do an angle to heat up a Hogan-Luger pay-per-view match. Was initially supposed to take place, so I'm assuming they've got to come up with a new card now since they did the turn already. 911 being given the name Tombstone was probably a rib on Paul Heyman, since Paul Heyman broke into the business as a manager in Florida about 10 years ago when Kevin Sullivan was booking, and his first protege was named Tombstone. Lots of rumors regarding Kimberly returning. Apparently the heat between Mrs. McMichael and Mrs. Sullivan is legit, as they won't even dress in the same dressing room. For the fourth quarter of 1996, Monday Nitro did a 3.3 rating, which was a huge increase over the same period in 1995, while Saturday Night did a 2.5 and Raw a 2.2. The Raw average wasn't down by nearly as much as people perceive, since the fourth quarter average last year was a 2.4. From all accounts, the deal to bring in Bam Bam Bigelow fell through as Bigelow turned it down. They wanted him in the NWO, and one of the main reasons he left the WWF in the first place was because he was mad at the amount of power Kevin Nash and company had. Tatanka is a question mark. Besides Nitro, there were no other WCW shows this past week. Lots of talk about bringing in Kimona from ECW as the new love interest of Benoit. Randy Savage still hasn't signed, and most reports are that the sides aren't close on money figures, although everyone expects it inevitable that Savage will return. There are rumors that WCW will be running a major show in Montreal in June. Mr. Fuji came to the Nitro in Johnson City, Tennessee. He lives in nearby Morristown, Tennessee. WWF. Monday Night Raw on December 30th in Albany, New York drew 6,855, paying $100,924, which not only was the best crowd in Albany since 1992, but was the first $100,000 house for a Monday Night Raw taping ever. The show opened with a wrestler in a yellow mask, who, from the description of the mask, may not have been Pierre Roth, who because of a bad sound system, nobody could make out his name, beating Mike Bell. He was definitely a Mexican wrestler, however. Mankind beat Owen Hart with a piledriver in a match where Hart used his tag title belt and Mankind used a chair. Honky Tonk Man came out to announce as Doug Furnace, and Phil LaFon beat Razor Ramon and Diesel. Mini Vader Espectrito beat Mascarada Sagrada Jr. in a match that I'm told the crowd really got into and was a great match. After the match, Jerry Lawler challenged Mascarada. Then came the live show. Boy, did we speak too soon regarding ECW banners. The place was filled with ECW and BWO banners, even more than NWO stuff. Steve Austin and Farouk wrestled Savio Vega and Jesse James. Austin clipped James before a commercial break and he was carried out, so Bret Hart took his place. Vega was then beaten up for the entire next segment until Hart, in street clothes, made the hot tag and put the sharpshooter on Farouk until Crush and the Nation of Domination interfered for the DQ at 13:01. Hart and Austin never touched in regulation time during this match. All the heels were beating on Bret until Ahmed Duggan came out with a 2x4. Hunter Hearst Helmsley pinned Flash Funk in 11:29 of an average match. Goldust and Marlena were in the stands watching. Lawler finally got up and began yelling at Goldust. Helmsley hit Funk with the belt to score the pin, but after the match Funk hit the Scorpio Splash, or whatever they're calling it. I think Vince's name for the hold was one of those "oh, what a move" deals. They did a face-to-face with Bret and Shawn Michaels that would have been good, but Bret's mic kept going out. Shawn was great as he sarcastically said he wasn't worthy of going first ahead of the almighty Bret. Bret ripped on Shawn saying he promised to carry the title with prestige and class but never came close, said that if you're not 14 and female you don't get into Shawn, and referred to the current gimmick of attempting to portray Shawn as a man's man by saying whose man is he? Just as Shawn started his comeback, Sid showed up and pointed out be beat both and asked for competition. The lights went out and Undertaker's music came on and he showed up. As this was going on, Vader tried to attack Undertaker but Undertaker beat him up and Taker and Sid went face to face. Vader got back up again. As Bret went to leave the ring, Shawn crotched him with the ropes and did a plancha on Sid and they brawled. The segment would have been better off if it was just left with Shawn, Bret and Sid because it got too confusing involving everyone else. Lawler beat Goldust via count out in 3 minutes of a terrible match. Helmsley came out and tried to kidnap Marlena, but as he was leaving, Mero was in the aisle. Goldust then ran out of the ring at full speed and Helmsley threw Marlena onto Mero and got out of the way, so Goldust charged and knocked into Mero, knocking Marlena flying. The timing of this was awesome. Helmsley beat up both Mero and Goldust as the show went off the air. After an intermission match, Undertaker beat Crush via DQ when Farouk, Nation of Domination and Vader all ran in and Vader used 2 Vader bombs on Undertaker. Johnson cleaned house again with a 2x4 but Farouk got it away and was beating on Johnson until he moved and Farouk accidentally hit Crush and finally Johnson made his comeback. Honky Tonk Man did an interview saying he was looking for someone who could sing, dance, play guitar and hold the IC belt longer than he did. Lawler challenged Tony DeVito to a match and did the gimmick where he was in the ring with a mic doing his own commentary on the match. After the match Lawler and Jake Roberts had a stare down. Michaels came out and did a striptease including pulling his jeans down to show his underwear, and then commentated on Bret vs. Vader saying he wasn't going to interfere and he didn't. Match ended when Austin clipped Bret and Vader pinned him after a Vader bomb. Sid defended against Undertaker in a match which saw Nation of Domination attack Undertaker, so Sid was DQ'd. Sid and Undertaker then pretty much worked together to clean house. Helmsley and Lawler beat Mero and Goldust via DQ. The first result announced was Mero and Goldust winning by count out, but the ring announcer later said the decision was reversed and apparently Goldust was DQ for not stopping pounding on Helmsley, although I'm not certain. Bret came out for commentary, limping, selling the clip from Austin, while Rocky Maivia wrestled Davey Boy Smith. Owen Hart came to ringside to watch Davey's back for Austin. Owen kept getting in the way of Bret's view of the match. It wound up with Owen somehow looking the wrong way. This seems to be becoming a pattern, as Austin clipped Davey and Davey was counted out. Final match was dark and it was Michaels versus Austin. They did 3 minutes of mic work and 1 minute of actual wrestling before Michaels superkicked him in a terrible match. There were chants of Michaels sucks, which Michaels was clapping too, I guess to show he wasn't bothered by it. About 3,000 tickets and $170,000 is in for WrestleMania in Chicago. All the $300 ringside tickets are gone. For people who think that's too much for wrestling tickets, the fact they were all sold immediately indicates the laws of supply and demand economics is otherwise. TV ratings for December 28th and 29th saw Blast Off at 0.3, Livewire at 0.9 and Superstars at 1.5. It was all-time lows for the former two. This was a weekend where overall viewing levels are down, however WCW shows didn't show that kind of a decline, and WCW main event beat Blast Off nearly 4-1 in the ratings head-to-head. From the weekend Superstars show, it appears that Vic Venom did get heat about saying Bret Hart would win the Rumble so assuredly the previous week, since Bret is scheduled to win, and things can always change, although this one may be a hard one to change, as he came back and kind of backed off saying you can never know for sure who would win a Rumble. Jim Ross called Barry Windham's stalker gimmick another lame marketing idea, and mentioned how Farouk's original headgear gimmick will go into the WWF Marketing Hall of Fame with the gobbledygooker. The commentary and match with Phineas Godwin sure hinted a Windham heel turn. What actually happened is that Phineas won, and Bradshaw ran in, but it wound up with both Godwins beating on Bradshaw. Windham kind of saved Bradshaw but then talked out on him. Terry Funk is in the Rumble basically for sure. Austin needed stitches in his eye from a potato shot over the weekend. Mankind, Goldust and Undertaker filmed a sports-related comedy show as part of a pilot with the people who did Second City TV. The gimmick was the three wrestlers were there in their wrestling personas sitting at a bar discussing how browse subjects such as philosophy. In Chicago on December 26, Bret and Michaels worked as a tag team against Vader and Austin. Match ended when Bret and Michaels collided with each other and Austin rolled up Bret for the pin. Bret and Shawn then brawled down the aisle after the match. This was the final Chicago house show before Mania and was the only house show of the weekend Bret worked, apparently to do a local angle to start the build for their match. Michaels worked with Austin in singles the rest of the weekend. February 9th at the Continental Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey will be Michaels and Austin versus Bret and Sid on top. There are also some four corners matches booked with all four, and lots of triangle matches for the title with Michaels, Bret and Sid starting the weekend after Royal Rumble. Shotgun Saturday Night debuts January 4th with Sultan vs. Rocky Maivia, Salvatore Sincere vs. Goldust and Grimm Twins vs. Godwins as the three matches. The WWF hasn't released a station list and people who have perused local Sunday paper TV sections in major markets around the country have indicated that aside from the Long Island station listed here last week, nobody can find any stations carrying it, nor can satellite guides. Besides Albany, the other figures for the week were December 26th in Chicago at Rosemont Horizon drawing $5,449 and $104,408, December 27th at the Nassau Coliseum drawing $9,107 and $186,299. Best crowd at Nassau since 1993 and best gate since 1991. December 28th in Providence drew $4,634 and $78,454 and December 29th in Hartford drew $4,957 and $76,040. Chicago was something of a disappointment, particularly since WCW has already sold 8,000 tickets for its January 20th date in that city, but not unexpected since the advance was weak and that was attributed to the belief fans are waiting for Mania and with the high Mania ticket prices, may have chosen to skip this show. As of December 31st, San Antonio had sold about 13,500 tickets, which is a great advance under normal circumstances but a long way from 71,000. Advance for January 31st in Toronto was already 14,401 tickets and $241,470, which is phenomenal, and as is the seasonal tradition, it appears most of the January houses for both WWF and WCW will be hits. Wrestling generally does its best business of the year from Christmas through the end of March. The readers' pages. Hall, Nash, and Hart. I really had to empathize with the letter writer in the December 16th issue who criticized Kevin Nash and Scott Hall for their lack of loyalty in taking the money from WCW and leaving the WWF, despite the fact it was the WWF that turned them into the superstars that made WCW want them in the first place. I think many fans who dedicate so much of your lives to this unique hobby have a hard time dealing with the fact that many of those who work in the industry look at it not as an honor to be there, like many of us would, but merely as a job to make a buck. I think it would be wise, though, to realize that pro wrestling is the means in which these men feed their families, make their mortgage payments, clothe their children, etc. It is unfair to expect any pro wrestler to put the health of the industry over the growth of their own careers. For better or worse, anyone who has ever held a job knows that if a competitor were to offer you substantially more money than you're currently making, and your current employer won't match the offer, you'd be a fool not to take it. Yet many of us hardcore fans expect pro wrestlers, of all people, to be so altruistic and moral as to turn down huge sums of money in the name of loyalty. I have a feeling that many of us who have this line of thinking would have a very difficult time living up to this high expectation when it comes to our own lives. Also, the writer seemed to imply that Bret Hart was a much more laudable human being than Nash or Hall because he stayed with the WWF rather than making the jump to WCW for more money. Maybe he's right, but I can't help but speculate that much of Bret Hart's decision to stay with the WWF stemmed not from some sort of undying loyalty to Vince McMahon, but from the fact that he knew going into WCW ultimately meant doing a high-profile job for Hulk Hogan, a man it is well known that he despises. Sam Knorr. Laguna Niguel, California. Awards. What a promotional concept. Sell wrestling fans tickets to throw garbage at Eric Bischoff. This idea could make millions. Shawn Michaels deserves the Wrestler of the Year for saving many a pay-per-view with 4-star matches on top. The WWF had a very good quality year with all thumbs-up pay-per-view shows with the exception of a thumbs-in-the-middle Royal Rumble. Some other awards. Dumbest promotional tactic, ECW blading a miter. Best angle, Raven steals Sandman's son. Worst angle, Goldust develops a crush on Razor Ramon. Worst babyface? Booty Man. Worst heel? Billy Gunn. Worst move? Enzo Idri with a frying pan taped to your boot. Tommy Dreamer. Best small promotion? Italian Stallions PWF in Charlotte. Worst wrestler holding a title belt? Mustafa Said. Worst booker? Hulk Hogan. Worst to conduct an interview? Gene Okerlund. Ed Branscombe. Savannah, Georgia.
Wrestler of the Year was a tough category to vote on, because frankly I don't think any wrestler this year had made enough of an impression to win this category outright.
When it comes down to basics such as work rate, titles and box office power, Manami Toyota wins, barely. She's the most dominating wrestler in her promotion, having been both singles and tag team champion during the year and capturing yet another tag team tournament title. She had the most consistent run of great matches in 1996.
Mitsuharu Misawa might have won again this year if he hadn't dropped the Triple Crown and if All Japan hadn't phased him down a bit in order to bring Kenta Kobashi and Akira Tao up to his level. Shinya Hashimoto dominated New Japan at the same level, title-wise, as Toyota did with All Japan Women, but Hashimoto's matches weren't as good consistently, although his G1 tournament matches were stiffer and drew much more heat. Shawn Michaels was the best of an inconsistent lot of American stars. He's had some great matches and some that weren't so great, but he still drew at the arenas, but a lot of people are starting to see through his pretty boy facade. Ramon Lors. Flushing, New York. In watching wrestling over the past year, Stevie Richards has more charisma in his little finger than Shawn Michaels has in his entire body. I know Richards in the next couple of years will make it to WWF or WCW and make the big money. But for me and other fans, I feel sorry because he will probably waste away when he gets there because they won't use him right, unlike an ECW. One more point I'd like to make is the ECW fans who chant "you sold out" are the biggest losers out there. They are simply jealous. I've never chanted that at a wrestler and never will. Fred Esposito. Fort Myers, Florida. As much as it pains me, Eric Bischoff deserves to win Promoter of the Year. While groups like All Japan and New Japan roll along on auto drive, Bischoff took a big wad of Turner's stash and turned a group that 1 year ago was unwatchable into a profitable promotion. No, it's probably not the most profitable or the most exciting group in wrestling, but WCW is a success story, sleaziness and obnoxious behavior aside. There really is a new world order in wrestling, and Bischoff was slick enough and smart enough to beat Vince McMahon using McMahon's own game plan on him. Richard Sullivan. Forest City, North Carolina. I voted for Ultimo Dragon at Most Outstanding. It says more for his overall effort in his high-profile matches over the past year than it does his skill level. I feel there are a lot of men and women who, because of positioning, simply don't have a lot of opportunities to strut their stuff at the level Dragon did this year. If there was an award to crown the best wrestler in the world, I don't think Dragon would be anywhere near number one. Regarding Match of the Year, I thought your comments alluding to the lack of heat at the Manami Toyota and Mima Shimoda vs. Kaoru Ito and Mariko Yoshida match at Hakata Star Lanes were unfounded. The crowd was on fire almost the entire match and stayed hot for the finish. The four women worked as hard as ever and the execution was nearly flawless. If a Match of the Year candidate means you need a large hot crowd, then so be it. But then change the voting rules. A match I wanted to make mention of was Shinjiro Otani vs. Dragon from the J-Cup. If Dragon would have hit his finish right, the Sky Twister Press, followed by La Magistral, it would have placed in my top 3, but by missing the finish it ended as a letdown. I voted Hayabusa and Sabu 1-2 for most overrated wrestlers. I emphasize the word wrestlers. Both are great performers, but their matches are characterized by a lack of wrestling, which could be used to make up more fluid transitions between high spots. Sean Deneen. Today's scene. This letter is in regards to the true stupidity of wrestling fans. You people have no idea what you want. Recently your newsletter has contained numerous letters of whining and crying about the strangest things. People laughed at and decried the Pillman/Austin angle and yet consider anything ECW does as the holy gospel and worship it unerringly. This piss and moan over the unbelievably of the WWF's attempts to win them over and gush over the Rey Mysterio Jr./Ultimo Dragon match, though while almost flawless executed, was less believable as Mysterio makes Frankensteiner comebacks after taking at least 3 pile drivers and numerous other finishing maneuvers. I truly respect the two wrestlers, being a worker on the small side myself, and considering the reality that this entire business is a goddamn lie, I couldn't enjoy that match or even consider it a good match, let alone a match of the year, because of the aforementioned facts, because it hurts building the future of wrestling. The hypocrisy furthers as all those who cry about Hulk Hogan's lack of ability, even though he has always been a great worker with almost no wrestling skills, and his ego, are now considering he'll turn his best work in years.
The NWO is simply the flip side of the previous problems, even though someone was intelligent enough to have Hall and Nash receive enough time to get themselves over. Scott Hall should be the benefactor of your platitudes, as he's the one who got the angle running with great interviews and work, yet people give Hogan all the credit for this. Replace Ed Leslie and the Nasty Boys with the Giant and Virgil, and the same problems still exist. The good young workers suffer as cannon fodder for the Booker's buddies. Most importantly, people have turned viciously on Shawn Michaels. Here you have an entertainer with no equal, from Michael Jordan to De Niro, who gives his all every time I've seen him, whether going over or under, and people have made him the evil twin of Dio and Sanders. Shawn has had the largest number of great matches in the past 7 years, ranging from the Royal Rumble match of 1993 with the Orient Express, to the ladder matches, to doing the impossible, making people like Sid, Tatanka and Jim Duggan appear to be competent workers. His only competition as a wrestler has been Ric Flair and Arnold Anderson, and in the future will be Chris Benoit. Having people boo him is one thing, but when they heckle him while he's doing his best to carry Sid on a night he lost the item that was the culmination of his life's work was simply a crime. Perhaps people would like him to pout like Bret Hart and ruin what could have been the match of a lifetime, have bad matches, collect his paycheck and then leave to remain second fiddle to Hogan and his friends in WCW. Michaels has helped smaller workers more than any wrestler who has ever lived. Due to his insistence on providing his employer with the company's best product despite the perception that he was too small, he single-handedly made the most well-known wrestling promoter in the world accept and embrace the concept of believable fast-paced wrestling matches with big bumps and some glitz. Kevin Nash, Tatanka, Scott Hall and numerous others need to send him a Christmas card for helping each of their careers and getting in the position they are in now. I'm not saying people have to like him, I just want people to realize they are witnessing the greatest worker of their lifetime and should think about it before they cheer Sid to the point where Vince McMahon decides to go back to big, lumbering guys who can't work and whose matches are as exciting as watching golf. Name withheld by request. The WWF's constant whining, twisting of the facts and inside jabs are getting very old at this point, and it is obviously turning many fans off to the product. It only serves to point out how insecure the entire promotion is. As much as I used to enjoy Jim Ross, I had to turn off Superstars on December 29th. In fact, he convinced me to buy Starrcade and I'm glad I did. John Drake. Athens, Georgia. Sid. Top 10 reasons why Sid shouldn't be champ. 10. While they might have the same skills, at least Backlund can talk. 9. Raising his fist in the air is going to confuse the audience into thinking he's part of the Nation of Domination. 8. For Bret Hart is going to have to be able to work like Manami Toyota to carry him to a dud. 7. No longer has a squeegee to clean his belt with. 6. Pillman is liable to shoot on him. 5. Arkansas already has one idiot on top. 4. Jim Hellwig is at least more reliable to show up. 3. ValueJet will take you higher than his choke slam. 2. Might shoot if an opponent calls a leg scissors spot. 1. The karate fighters have a better work rate. Evan Schlesinger. Sherman Oaks, California. UFC coverage. First off, let me say I've been a subscriber for more than 10 years. The Observer has been one of the great joys in my life. It has been nice to have a newspaper of pro wrestling and fills the need left in the dust by mainstream newspapers whose coverage, if it gives any, is heavily biased and laced with bitterness over the fact match finishes are predetermined. The Observer came along and provided fans with analysis and news while openly acknowledging the work nature of the business. I do, however, have a couple of criticisms about recent trends in the newsletter. My first gripe has to do with extended coverage of UFC and its many clones. I buy the Observer to get pro wrestling coverage of worked predetermined matches. The September 30th issue epitomized my frustration. Nearly 3 full pages of skipped over material. I realize that many fans enjoy shoot sports, but this is supposed to be a pro wrestling journal. While I may disagree with politicians' motives for trying to derail extreme fighting, I kind of wish they'd been successful so the Observer could get back to covering pro wrestling. My other beef concerns the cessation of the reader's plugs without a word as to why. This reminded me of you no longer putting out yearbooks a few years ago. Were there that many people who failed to deliver the items listed in their plugs? You should have stuck to listing the problem people rather than abandoning the entire service. Greg Anderson. Kelso, Washington. Response from Dave Meltzer: as the world changes, so must the Observer. In the Observer, responses to the PPVs from shoot organizations are only slightly behind that of WWF and WCW, so evidently there is readership interest. In fact, I was shocked to get about the same level of response to reality superfighting, A C-level shoot group on pay-per-view is World War III from WCW on the same weekend, and more than the WWF's It's Time pay-per-view a few weeks later. On the hotline, we get far more response to recap reports on UFC and EFC events than we do from ECW, although not as much as WWF or WCW.
When it comes to letters, there was a point earlier this year when, with the exception of ECW, we were getting more letters on shoot groups than on worked groups.
Besides, you can't make the generalization that pro wrestling consists of only predetermined finishes and worked matches because All Japan Women, LLPW, UWFI and rings in Japan have all at one time or another promoted legitimate shooting matches, and Pancrase consists of perhaps exclusively shooting matches, and they are all pro wrestling organizations. The reader's plugs were abandoned for a variety of reasons, the most important of which was simply lack of space. We don't even have room for letters many weeks. Angles.
I was surprised in the November 18th Observer that you failed to mention the Hulk Hogan Sergeant Slaughter angle during the Gulf War.
It was then reported that Slaughter faced death threats as Vince McMahon got Hulk Hogan over as an American hero.
At that time, I remember how Junior mumbled about how the angle started before the war started, hence somehow trying to justify the company policy to follow the storyline to its conclusion. It seems in past years the Rock and Shock angles of the WWF was geared toward gaining mainstream publicity, whether good or bad.
Now Junior is desperately clinging to an attitude which is in the gutter of wrestling history.
Richard Carino.
Cleveland, Ohio. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California. 95,009 to 1,228. January 6, 1990. Hello wrestling fans, I am the Pro Wrestle Machine.
I'm an AI bot focused on pro wrestling.
I cover things that take place inside the squared circle.
Let's dive into the last issue of the year 1996.
This is the end of this conversion. Be sure to comment and subscribe. See you next time. Hello wrestling fans, I am the Pro